30 minutes of power.
Welcome to Top 30 Minutes of Power, a podcast dedicated to encourage, educate, and inspire godly women to pursue their passions, with hosts Jory O'Neill and Nicole Salter. Thanks for coming. Let's get ready to power up.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Top 30 Minutes of Power. I am Nicole Salter. I am your moderator for this evening. And we are going to welcome the fabulous, hardworking Jory O'Neill, who has a snippet of what we are to expect in the upcoming training that she is doing. Here we are. Welcome, Jory.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So I just finished a book by T.D. Jakes called When Women Pray. And if I'm not going to spoil it for you, it's an incredible book. I think everyone should go out and get it, read it, buy it. He's not giving me any proceeds if you do. But so when you buy his book, make sure you buy mine too. But he coined a phrase in there and it hit me. And then I don't know, I felt like the sky opened and like all this information started pouring down and I didn't have room enough. My hand didn't move fast enough to write it all. But he mentioned the idea that there's a danger of creating space for God that we all feel. And I was like, a danger? That it sounds oxymoronic, right? Like danger and then creating space for God. And so I want to come on here real quick because I just started listening to a podcast by Brene Brown called Uncovering Us. And this entire time, like we've been doing this podcast, I think there are certain topics that we don't discuss. Like we don't really get too much into politics, social justice, things of that nature, the LGBTQ. We don't go into these topics and these categories. Mainly because the podcast is very specific. If you read the title, the cover art, it says Christian women, right? Encouraging and empowering, right? So those don't align with Christianity, don't align with, women. Yes, no, maybe so. But the entire premise of this podcast is to inspire women, right? To inspire, to encourage, and to educate them. And I got a kick in the head today. So I had this title, Creating Space for God. And then I got a kick in the head today because a large portion of the things that block us, right? Nicole shared with us 20 things that stop us or block us from hitting our goals. I think there are things that are underlined. Like before we get to those blockades, there are things internally that we experience that we don't have words for, or we don't put words to. I'm going to say that we choose not to put words to certain things. There's no way that I can make progress toward my goal if I am housing things like shame, guilt, regret, right? These are things that emotionally drain me if I'm like putting up a front, right? Faking the funk. It takes a lot of energy to pretend to be something that you're not. So if all my energy is being wasted on putting up my guard, protecting myself, right? And these are all things that I can't speak for everybody. I can't speak for even Nicole, but I can speak for me. And I've experienced all these things. I've been in positions and situations in my life. I wish not on my worst enemy. And the feelings that left, right? The feelings that were left over, sometimes they're very overwhelming. And because I wasn't trained, I wasn't taught, I didn't know how to deal with them, you stuff them, you suppress them, and then you try to keep it moving. And I think that's a model that we really have to check, especially in the Black community. This keep it moving. It's all right. You be all right. toughen up. But it doesn't allow for empathy. It doesn't allow for us to properly give these feelings of shame, of regret, of hurt. We're not taught on how to deal with those things. And so now we're grown, right? Some of us is grown. And now we're trying to start businesses. Now we're trying to create change. Now we're trying to get forward momentum. Now we're trying to reach goals, but we ain't dealt with that stuff yet. And so we take 2 steps forward and we're triggered. But again, because we haven't dealt with that stuff, we're like, oh no, and we label it something else. I know for me, I procrastinate a lot. And it's not because I don't know how to time block. It's not because I'm afraid of success. It's not none of those things. I procrastinate because I'm afraid of the unknown. If I hold off on entering into this unknown realm, I hold off on experience possible pain, discomfort, regret, remorse. Conversely, I also hold off on experiencing joy, happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction. And so there's this weird dance inside that's happening where I desire to go forward, but I'm afraid to go forward. But that fear is based in something very real. That fear is based in this trauma that I experienced, right? This hurt that I experienced, this loss that I experienced. I don't know what to do with that. So now I turn all my energy to this other thing because it makes me feel more productive. It makes me feel like I have some sort of control. That control. Ooh, I love that. Ooh, that control. Ooh, it's like a warm blanket at night. But it's false because I haven't let this thing go. I haven't dealt with this thing back here. And so I want to briefly, literally 6 minutes, I want to briefly talk about the dangers of creating space for God. Because whether you want to admit it or not, when we allow these things that are greater than us to put us in this bondage or put us into this, I don't like using the word, but it enslaves us. These feelings, regret, shame, hurt, remorse, discomfort, unforgiveness, they hold us. And because they're bigger than us, they feel overwhelming. You'd be kidding yourself if you thought that you didn't also need something greater than you to save you from these things. And the only thing that can save us from these feelings, from these experiences, from this trauma, right? And the effects of the trauma is God. That's it. That's it. And so I want to ask a couple of questions. Again, this is just an opportunity for you to reflect, because over the 5-day challenge that I want to do, I want to help people like really understand the things, the roadblocks that are preventing them from not only getting to that goal, but getting clear on their purpose and their why. Right? Nicole mentioned the why. The why is what grounds us. The why is what keeps you going back, even when you don't see forward progress. The why is why we keep showing up, regardless of how many people desire to opt in or how many people download our podcast. Why? I know why I do it. Because there's a calling on my life to go out and preach the word in season and out of season, specifically to women, to a marginalized group of humans who have been overlooked and undervalued for way too long. I have a passion for serving women. That's my why. And it has a lot to do with my own previous experiences and the things that I witnessed growing up, the strong maternal figures that I saw growing up, and the secret hurt that they experienced, which was extremely evident in the way that they moved, the things that they talked about, the things that they valued. I don't desire for any human to be in bondage. It is estimated that there are still over 50 million people slaves right now. And the large majority of those humans are women. So while a lot of us aren't in shackles physically, we are mentally, emotionally, and unfortunately for a large number of humans, spiritually. We have not allowed God to come in our lives and free us from these things, to remove these burdens from us. We've not. So the dangers of making space for God in your life. A couple of questions. Then I'm gonna shut my mouth and we're gonna keep it moving. I want you to ask yourself, how often do you try to convince yourself that you're okay? I want you to write that question down. How often do you try to convince yourself that you're okay? Now, mind you, you're not trying to convince anybody else. How often do you try to convince yourself that you're okay? A second question, how often do you try to convince God that you don't need anything? I know oftentimes I pray and then God comes with the blessing. He comes with the response. He comes with the answer. And he's like, here you go. You asked for it. And I'm like, oh no, I don't need that. I'm okay, God, I'm okay. No. He's like, no, but you prayed. I'm like, yeah, I prayed, I said I wanted that. I thought I did, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm good. Right? And we do this to God, but God knows the desires of our hearts. So he's not going to give us anything that we actually don't need. But we've convinced ourselves that either we're not worthy of this blessing, we don't deserve this blessing, it's not the right time for this blessing, you're not the right fit for this blessing, even though it comes from the maker of the universe who speaks things into existence. But he got confused about who he's giving his blessing to. Okay. All right. You tell me if that makes sense. In his book, T.D. Jakes mentions a number of women who experienced a lot of what I talked about: trauma, loss, regret. But there are a couple of stories that resonated with me most. And these were stories of women who were barren, right? So barrenness is when you are unable to reproduce. Happened to Sarah, happened to a number of women. Elizabeth, right? Mary's cousin was barren for a while until she had John. Rachel, right? Isaac's wife. And he makes mention of one particular woman. And for me, she stood out mainly because she had convinced herself that she was okay and that it was all right that she didn't have offspring. The Shamanite woman. But the Shamanite woman, she was a well-to-do woman. And this was during the time of the prophet Elijah. And so Elijah came into town and she had room in her house to be that person, right? Very famous person comes into town and she's like, come stay at my house. So she clears the room and she makes it all beautiful and all pretty. And Every time Elijah came to town, the prophet came by. She always was looking for him, like, there you go. Let me make my room ready. Because every time he came, she felt a little more whole. She was able to be herself. She was able to be authentic. She was able to let her guard down every time the man of God came into town. And there was one moment where he hadn't come for a while. And then when he did come, again, she, put out all the stops, had him a nice room, made sure he had food for him and his servant. And before he leaves, God tells him, he says, tell her that the Lord hears her prayers and that this time next year, she'll be holding a son. So he says it. And she's like, no, man of God, don't you ever say something like that. No. I do. Listen, we tried, it didn't work. And I'm okay now. I'm okay with not having kids. I've come to this place where I made peace with it. I'm okay. Don't you be putting no false hopes in my mind, man of God. All right. That's not nice. Don't you do that. And I'm sitting listening to the story like, this woman's foolish. This is the man of God. If he says it, it's going to happen. But I'm the same way. There's so many times where God is desiring to bless me. And I guarantee you, if you look back on times in your life, there have been instances where you've asked God for things. And when he was about to give them to you, you started cluttering up. You started figuring out reasons that you shouldn't have it, or why this wasn't the right time, or why it wouldn't work out. Or it wasn't meant for you. It was meant for somebody else, but not you. You just happened to be there. And so, sure enough, the Shamanite woman, she gives birth. She has a son. She loves the son. She dedicates the son. The son is great until the son is dead. Son dies. What does she do? She cursed God. She go back to living her life and going out into town. She didn't do any of those things. She put her dead son in the prophet's room and then ran out of the town to go get him. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how often do I respond this way? First off, the fact that she had a room in her house specifically for God, I was like, do I make room for God like that? Do I give him an entire space physically, emotionally, mentally? Is there a space special for God in my life? Have I given him the honor of occupying my time, my mental, physically, right? And on top of that, do I take the time to prepare for my interaction with him? You see, because every time Elijah came into town, this lady prepped that room. She prepped it. The linens were fresh. The floor was swept. The servant said, kill the fattened calf. She prepared for God's arrival. How prepared am I to interact with God? Daily, weekly, or is it I just come as I am and say, okay, God, here you go. And when calamity falls, because it will fall, when tragedy strikes, don't think it won't, it will. Is my response to hide? Is it to run? Is it to curse God? Or do I run after God? Does it force me to run further and closer toward him? And so I'm sharing all this because honestly, I have no idea what is going to happen during this 5-day challenge. And I think half of me is like excited. The other half is scared. because you've decided, if you've joined this 5-day challenge, that you're going to make room for God for 5 days straight, that you're going to dedicate an hour of time to focus and to finally see what your purpose is, to finally get clear on your why, to figure out how to have purpose in the things that God has given you passion for, and to remove those roadblocks and create a plan to steward the gift that God has put inside of you. You've decided to make space for God. And when that happens, there's magic. So I'm super excited. I hope you're super excited. It's going to be an incredible time, an opportunity to really dive deep inward and to pull those things out that maybe, quite maybe, you've been suppressing for quite some time. So, with that said, super excited about this 5-day challenge, and I am hopeful that the fruit that will be produced will be fruit that will last. Thank you guys so much. Again, Joy O'Neill, 30 Minutes of Power, signing off. Till next time. Love yourself, love the Lord. Be an empowered woman who uses her power to empower others. Peace. Thank you for listening. We pray you have been empowered by the message. If you'd like to be a part of the conversation, join our free Facebook group, AZ Iron Sharpens Iron. Every Monday, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, meet us back here for another session of empowerment. Share this episode with another woman who needs to be empowered. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, be an empowered woman using your power to empower others.
30 minutes of power.